The story begins in a mysterious world that exists thousands of kilometers above the sky. Reaching this place was almost like inviting death, but a group of soldiers still risked their lives and managed to get there. However, the moment they arrived, they came face to face with the largest and most dangerous monster in that world. Jack sensed its presence and quickly hid by lowering his head into the water. A few seconds later, he saw a giant foot appear in front of him, causing the nearby sheep to run away in fear. Then the monster grabbed one of the sheep and swallowed it whole. Seeing this terrifying sight, Jack became extremely frightened. At the same time, a soldier hiding behind a tree slowly turned around to look at the monster. But the creature immediately noticed his scent and began sniffing the air. The scared soldier quickly hid behind the tree again, but the monster started walking toward him with huge steps. The soldier held his breath, trying not to move, but eventually panic took over and he suddenly began to run. Unfortunately, it was already too late because the monster had spotted him. Without wasting any time, the giant creature pulled the entire tree out of the ground and threw it aside. The soldier ran as fast as he could to save himself, but his small legs were no match for the monster's massive strides. The creature quickly caught up to him and knocked him unconscious with a single hit. It was the first time the monster had ever seen a human, so it bent down and carefully examined him. Just as it was about to pick him up and carry him away, the captain rushed forward with a sword in his hand and stabbed the monster in the heel with all his strength. The giant roared in pain and immediately turned around, but in the next moment, it casually kicked the captain and sent him flying through the air. Then it pulled the sword out of its foot and picked up both soldiers, planning to eat them later. From a distance, Jack watched everything happen. At that moment, he realized that coming to this place had been a terrible mistake. Earlier, Jack had received several magical beans from a priest. One day, his girlfriend, who was also a princess, came to visit him. While they were together, one of the beans accidentally came into contact with water and instantly began growing at an unbelievable speed. Suddenly, the entire wooden house started shaking violently, and strange noises could be heard coming from below the ground. Both of them were frozen with fear and could not move. Then the ground suddenly split open, and a gigantic beanstalk burst through the house and shot high into the sky. Seeing this, the princess immediately tried to run away, but a table suddenly fell on top of her. Jack rushed forward to help her, but before he could reach her, the growing vines threw him out of the house. At that moment, a wooden door suddenly opened and the princess noticed a possible way out. However, just as she tried to escape through it, the giant vines slammed the door shut. The princess desperately tried to open it again, but the door would not move even a little. Seeing this, Jack immediately grabbed an axe and started trying to cut the giant vines. But before he could do much, the entire house was suddenly pulled out of the ground along with its roots and began rising into the sky. At the very last second, Jack jumped and grabbed onto the edge. The vines were growing so fast that within a few seconds the house had already climbed thousands of meters into the air. Jack swung the axe with all his strength and finally managed to cut through one of the vines. As soon as the vine broke, the princess quickly opened the door. But in the next moment, the wooden floor beneath her feet suddenly cracked apart. Even though Jack tried to hold onto her hand, she slipped away and began falling from a height of nearly 10,000 meters. Jack then started sliding down the magical beanstalk toward the ground. On the way down, the vines slowed his fall a little, and eventually he crashed onto the ground and lost consciousness. The princess was not as lucky because the giant beanstalk carried her to the world above the clouds. The next morning, Jack woke up in panic and saw the king standing in front of him. The king was desperately searching for the princess. Jack was terrified and had no choice but to tell him everything that had happened. When Jack pointed toward the sky, everyone saw a gigantic beanstalk stretching straight through the clouds. As soon as the king learned the truth, he wasted no time and sent a group of soldiers with Jack to rescue the princess. Soon they all started climbing the giant beanstalk and eventually passed through the clouds. After reaching higher up, the captain moved forward and began sliding across from one side to another because it was the only way to continue toward the princess. Jack had no choice but to remove his belt and prepare himself as well. But just when he was about to move forward, the curly-haired man standing nearby suddenly kicked him hard and pushed him ahead. The moment Jack looked down from such a terrifying height, he became extremely nervous. While sliding across, his hands suddenly slipped and he fell straight down. Luckily, the vines caught him halfway and saved his life. As soon as he regained consciousness, he immediately started climbing upward again. The higher they went, the worse the weather became. Powerful storms surrounded them and lightning flashed everywhere. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning struck one of the soldiers directly. The impact caused him to slip, and several other soldiers crashed into him and began falling as well. At the last moment, one soldier managed to grab the rope tightly. Because of him, the rest of the team somehow survived. However, the soldiers who had fallen were now hanging in the air. If they were not pulled up quickly, the entire team could be in danger. At that moment, Roderick turned to the man standing beside him and told him to cut the rope. The man liked the idea and immediately pulled out a hidden knife from his boot. The hanging soldiers begged him not to do it, but he showed no mercy. He cut the rope, and the trapped soldiers fell from a height of 10,000 feet. Somehow, the remaining soldiers finally reached the top, and by then morning had arrived. When Jack turned around and looked ahead, he was completely shocked because above the clouds there was an enormous hidden world. After seeing this incredible sight, everyone began moving toward it. As everyone moved deeper into this mysterious world, the captain suddenly noticed fresh footprints on the ground. From this, he realized that the princess had not gone back down and was still somewhere in this land. When the group finally came out of a cave, the captain was left completely amazed by the view in front of him. This world was much larger than anyone had expected. The team continued moving forward and began searching the area carefully. After some time, they noticed marks on the branches of several trees. These were signs left behind by the princess. Around the same time, Jack found the same book on the ground that he had once given to her. A little later, they discovered several broken branches nearby. This made them realize that some dangerous creature had probably taken the princess away. After this discovery, the group split into two teams and headed in different directions to continue the search. While traveling through the area, Jack and his companions reached a river where they spotted a large flock of healthy sheep. Since they had been hungry for many days, they decided to catch one and cook it. But as soon as they tried to grab a sheep, they accidentally triggered a giant trap hidden nearby. Jack quickly pulled out his knife and started cutting through the net with all his strength. At the same time, the captain was also trying to cut the ropes. Then he suddenly noticed something strange. All the crows in the area became frightened and flew away at once. The sheep also started running in the opposite direction. The captain felt that something was wrong, but he continued cutting the ropes. Somehow, both of them managed to escape from the trap. However, a terrifying roar suddenly echoed through the forest. In the very next moment, a gigantic giant appeared in front of them and grabbed both soldiers before carrying them away. Jack quietly began following the giant from a distance. He hoped that when the right moment came, he would be able to rescue his friends and the princess as well. Meanwhile, Roderick and the other two soldiers reached the edge of a cliff. The bald man felt that searching like this was pointless and decided to move ahead to find another route, but Roderick had his own plan. He suddenly shouted, "Look, there is Isabel." As soon as the bald man turned around and came closer to the edge of the cliff, Roderick took advantage of the moment and pushed him straight into the deep abyss below. Seeing this, Roderick's companions started laughing loudly, but suddenly a massive hand grabbed him from behind. At that exact moment, another giant appeared in front of them. This one was as huge as a mountain. Roderick became so terrified that he fell to the ground and quickly started searching through his bag. The giant stretched out its hand to grab him, but just before it could reach him, Roderick pulled out a shining crown. The moment the giants saw the crown, they immediately stopped moving. It was as if an invisible force had frozen them in place. In reality, this was a magical crown. Anyone who possessed this powerful crown could control the giants, and they would be forced to obey every command. On the other side, Jack continued following the giants until he finally reached their home. The sight there completely shocked him. Beautiful waterfalls flowed everywhere, and enormous mountains surrounded the area. The place looked almost like heaven. There, Jack saw a two-headed giant keeping the princess locked inside a cage. A short time later, the giant carried her toward the rest of the giants. All of them gathered together and stared directly at her. A short time later, the giant who had captured the captain and the large soldier finally returned. He carried both of them to the giant camp and threw them down near the cage. Seeing this, the two-headed giant became suspicious. He started thinking that there might be more humans hiding somewhere in this world. To test his suspicion, he grabbed the large soldier lying on the ground, twisted his neck, and swallowed him alive. After eating him, the giant spat out his metal armor. Then the giant turned toward the captain and threatened him. He warned that the princess would be next. Just then, a loud voice echoed through the area and immediately caught everyone's attention. The voice belonged to none other than the traitor, Roderick. The moment the giant saw the magical crown on his head, every giant dropped to their knees. At that moment, his true plan became clear to everyone. Roderick walked straight toward the two-headed giant and ordered him to kneel. Because of the power of the crown, the giant had no choice but to obey. After forcing him down, Roderick stepped onto the giant's face and slowly walked across him toward the throne. From that moment on, Roderick became the new king of the giants. He proudly announced that he would use the giant army to attack humans and conquer the entire world. Hearing this, the giant army became very excited and celebrated his decision. However, the two-headed giant seemed to be thinking about something else. Meanwhile, another giant picked up the captain and carried him away to prepare him for cooking. The giant threw him onto a large pile of sticky dough. The more the captain struggled, the deeper he became trapped inside it. Then the giant walked over and dumped a handful of dough directly onto him. After that, the giant did something disgusting. He rolled the captain over and placed him aside as if he were preparing a meal. Everything was ready, and only the vegetables were missing. As soon as the giant went away to collect them, Jack quietly arrived at the scene. The princess was overjoyed when she saw him, but Jack immediately signaled for her to stay silent. While the giant remained busy, Jack slowly moved closer to the cage. He tried to unlock it, but the lock was too difficult for him to open. The princess then told him to save the captain first, because he had been lined up beside several pigs and was about to be cooked. Jack quickly rushed over to him, pulled out his knife, and started cutting him free from the sticky dough. At that exact moment, the giant began returning with the seasonings. Seeing this, Jack quickly handed the knife to the captain and hid himself. Fortunately, the giant did not notice anything suspicious. He picked up several sharp wooden sticks and pushed one straight through a pig lying nearby. The pig, which had been screaming moments earlier, suddenly became silent. Now it was the captain's turn. The giant attacked without showing any mercy, but his aim was slightly off. Otherwise, the captain's future family line would have ended right there. Seeing how close he came to disaster, the captain was so terrified that he fainted on the spot. After that, the giant picked up all of them and placed them inside a huge furnace that was burning nearby. Now the only person who could save them was Jack. At this moment, Jack had already climbed onto a large iron ring above the giant, and the giant had no idea he was there. Meanwhile, the giant picked up a sharp knife and walked straight toward the princess. Without wasting any time, he reached into the cage, pulled her out, and placed her on the table. Then he began preparing to cut her. Just before the giant could attack, Jack quietly grabbed a heavy knife lying nearby. The giant was completely unaware of his presence. As the giant raised his weapon toward the princess, Jack suddenly jumped forward and drove the knife deep into the giant's back. The giant screamed in terrible pain. However, Jack refused to let go and held the knife tightly. In a panic, the giant lost control and slammed into a nearby wall. The impact was so powerful that the giant died on the spot. Seeing this, both the princess and the captain were completely shocked. After that, the three of them quickly made their way toward the magical beanstalk. However, a giant guard was already standing there. Roderick had sent him to protect the area. At that moment, Jack came up with a strange idea. He found a beehive and together with the captain slowly approached the sleeping giant. The captain carefully lifted the giant's helmet and Jack quietly dropped the beehive inside. The giant was still sleeping peacefully and had no idea what was about to happen. As soon as the beehive was placed inside, the captain quickly shut the helmet again. Then both of them ran away and hid behind a nearby rock with the princess. They waited silently. A short time later, the giant suddenly woke up screaming in pain as the bees began stinging him everywhere. He started shaking his body wildly and trying to escape. But the more he struggled, the more aggressively the bees attacked him. Terrified, the giant began running away. While trying to escape, he slipped and crashed into several rocks. Then he rolled down a slope and reached the edge of a cliff. It looked like he was about to fall. Suddenly, he removed his helmet. Seeing this, Jack, the captain, and the princess were briefly surprised. But then one bee flew directly toward him and stung him hard. The giant immediately lost his balance and fell straight off the cliff. Seeing this, all three of them celebrated with joy. They could hardly believe that they had defeated such a massive giant so easily. Afterward, they quickly decided to leave the area. However, the captain suddenly stopped. He explained that he needed to stay behind and take the magical crown away from Roderick. Because of this, Jack handed him a knife and then started descending the beanstalk with the princess. Around the same time, the giant's body finally crashed down to the ground below after falling through the giant vines. The loud impact was heard everywhere. Hearing the noise, the king immediately came out of his tent. The moment he saw the giant's body, he became frightened. Soon, many villagers also gathered around the area. Realizing the danger, the king made a difficult decision for the safety of his people and to stop more giants from entering their world. He immediately ordered the general to cut down the giant beanstalk. The soldiers quickly began driving huge iron spikes into the enormous beanstalk. The soldiers then attached strong hooks to the giant beanstalk. With the help of several horses and oxen, they began pulling it with all their strength. Slowly, the enormous beanstalk started shaking from its roots. However, this suddenly put the soldiers standing nearby in danger. A few moments later, the thick central vine also began to crack apart. Soldiers positioned higher up started falling, and panic quickly spread everywhere. At the same time, Jack and the princess were still climbing down the beanstalk. When they looked below, both of them became terrified because the giant vine was now completely unstable and could collapse at any moment. Realizing the danger, Jack quickly grabbed the princess tightly and caught hold of a hanging branch. The two of them swung through the air and rapidly descended toward the ground. Eventually, they fell onto a large pile of hay, which slowed their fall and allowed them to land safely. At that exact moment, Roderick gathered all the giants together and prepared them for an attack on the human world. Meanwhile, the two-headed giant sensed the presence of a human nearby, forcing the captain to remain hidden. A short time later, Roderick stepped forward and pulled out the magical beans that could grow giant beanstalks. But before he could use them, the captain suddenly attacked him. During the struggle, the magical beans were dropped onto the rocks, and Roderick fell directly into a deep pit below. Terrified, Roderick started calling the giants for help, while the captain stood before him ready to fight. The two-headed giant then ordered the other giants to rescue Roderick. As the giants began breaking apart the rocks above, a fierce battle started between the captain and Roderick below. Using his long sword, Roderick knocked the captain to the ground and sent his weapon flying away. After gaining the advantage, he launched a series of attacks without stopping. Somehow, the captain managed to block the strikes, and soon the fight turned into a contest of pure strength. Before long, the captain began losing ground. Roderick forced him underwater and tried to drown him. While struggling, the captain suddenly noticed a knife floating toward him in the water. At the perfect moment, he grabbed it with his teeth and immediately slashed Roderick across the face. The surprise attack filled Roderick with rage. He pushed the captain back with his weapon and forced him toward the edge of the cliff. Step by step, the captain retreated until he finally reached the very edge. Roderick then delivered a powerful kick that knocked him over. Fortunately, the captain managed to grab onto the rocks and avoid falling. Roderick began pressing his sword into the captain's hands, hoping he would lose his grip and fall to his death. However, he had underestimated the captain's determination. As Roderick moved in for another attack, the captain suddenly grabbed the weapon and drove it into Roderick's leg. Roderick screamed in pain. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the captain immediately thrust the sword into Roderick's stomach. The attack was fatal. Roderick collapsed and died on the spot. The moment he died, the magical power of the crown disappeared as well. The captain somehow managed to climb back to the top and moved forward to reclaim the magical crown. However, before he could reach it, the cave above suddenly collapsed. The two-headed giant grabbed the crown first and slipped it onto his finger. He immediately declared himself the new king. The moment he wore the crown, all of its magical power returned to him. Seeing this, the other giants once again dropped to their knees and obeyed him. At the same time, the captain noticed that the last remaining beanstalk leading back to the human world was about to break apart. Knowing he had no time to waste, he jumped directly onto the vine. The beanstalk rushed rapidly toward the castle below. At the perfect moment, the captain leaped off and landed safely in the water. When the two-headed giant realized that the path to the human world had been destroyed, he roared in anger. Suddenly, the smaller head noticed a bag lying on the ground nearby. It was the same bag filled with magical beans. The giant quickly picked it up and opened it. Inside were 4 magical beans. Seeing them, he became extremely excited. Without hesitation, he blew the beans into a nearby pool of water. The moment they touched the water, they instantly began growing. Within seconds, 4 enormous beanstalks burst through the ground and shot upward. After that, the two-headed giant gave a loud command, and all the giants started climbing down the new beanstalks toward the human world. At the very last moment, the two-headed giant also jumped down and began sliding toward the ground. Around the same time, Jack was giving water to his horse when he suddenly looked up at the sky. To his horror, he saw the giants rapidly descending toward the earth. Without wasting a second, he jumped onto his horse and raced away to warn the king. Meanwhile, the king's army was calmly marching toward the castle. Soon, Jack spotted them and began shouting that the giants were coming. However, the king still did not understand the danger. Then, without warning, several giants emerged from the forest behind them. Everywhere they went, they destroyed everything in their path. No one was able to stop them. Before long, the giant army reached the soldiers. One giant grabbed a soldier and swallowed him alive. Even the men on horseback could not escape from the giant's speed. At this moment, the humans were completely helpless against them. Then a round-faced giant tore a blade off a nearby windmill and hurled it toward the princess. The giant object crashed into the ground and smashed everything around it. The king's crown was also knocked off during the destruction. At the same time, the soldiers stationed at the castle spotted the king's army approaching. They immediately sent word inside and preparations for battle began. The captain quickly ordered his men to pour oil into the moat surrounding the castle so the enemy could be stopped. As soon as the king's army reached the castle walls, the order to fire was given. Within moments, hundreds of burning arrows were launched toward the advancing giants. As soon as the burning arrows struck the oil, huge flames spread everywhere. During the chaos, the king's army safely made it inside the castle. The moment the captain saw that the princess had returned safely, he immediately ordered the castle gates to be closed. However, Jack was still outside and several giants were chasing him. As the gates slowly began closing, Jack started to panic. But at the very last moment, he leaped forward with his horse and managed to get inside. Unfortunately, the two-headed giant also reached the gate right behind him and began climbing over it. Before he could enter, the captain attacked him. The giant lost his balance and fell directly into the burning fire below. Soon, the flames completely surrounded him. Surprisingly, none of the other giants came to help him. They simply stood there and watched as he burned. Meanwhile, people inside the castle were still discussing the situation when a huge iron bell suddenly came flying out of the sky. It smashed into part of the castle wall and crashed to the ground. Before anyone could understand what had happened, the sounds of battle echoed across the area. A moment later, 2 massive iron hooks were thrown toward the castle gates. The giants grabbed the hooks and started pulling with all their strength. Immediately, a fierce struggle began between the humans and the giants. This was actually part of the round-faced giant's plan. He called more giants to the front and ordered them to break down the castle gate. Inside the castle, complete chaos broke out. The princess grabbed Jack and hurried deeper into the castle. At the same time, the old king ordered all of his soldiers to use their crossbows against the giants. More and more giants arrived and joined the attack. They pulled even harder on the gates. Following the captain's orders, the soldiers fired several giant crossbows. The bolts struck the wooden gates with perfect accuracy. As soon as they landed, the soldiers began pulling the crossbow carts backward. The castle army split into groups troops to help defend the entrance, and even the king joined the effort. He was asking the captain about the giant's weakness when suddenly a burning tree fell from the sky and scattered the soldiers. Moments later, several more flaming trees crashed down around them. Because of this, the soldiers began losing their grip on the ropes. It seemed that the gate would soon break apart. Meanwhile, the princess led Jack farther inside the castle. Suddenly, a powerful roar echoed through the building, and large cracks began spreading across the ground. Both of them stepped back in fear as stones started rising into the air. Then two enormous hands burst out from below. It was the same two-headed giant. Even though he had fallen into the fire earlier, he had survived because he landed in water beneath it. He had secretly entered the castle through the sewer tunnels. Suddenly, he caught the scent of the royal princess. Jack carefully lifted the blanket they were hiding under and realized that the giant had not noticed them yet. However, in a fit of anger, the giant smashed a large mirror nearby. Hidden under the blanket, Jack and the princess were shaking with fear. However, the giant quickly spotted them from above. Realizing they had been discovered, Jack immediately grabbed the princess and started running with all his strength. The giant chased them without stopping. With nowhere else to go, they were forced to run toward the second floor of the castle. They did not even dare slow down for a moment. Suddenly, a giant hand burst out from the side and grabbed the princess. Without wasting any time, Jack picked up a nearby axe and attacked the giant, but the giant caught him with his other hand. The smaller head began mocking Jack and laughing at him. Furious, Jack swung the axe and smashed the giant's helmet. Enraged, the giant opened his massive mouth. At that moment, Jack pulled out the magical bean hidden inside his locket and threw it directly into the giant's mouth. The bean went straight into the giant's stomach. Almost immediately, the two-headed giant felt that something was wrong. He quickly threw both Jack and the princess onto the ground. Then a strange vine suddenly burst out from his body. Terrified, Jack and the princess stepped backward. Moments later, more vines exploded out of the giant at incredible speed. They tore through his body and spread throughout the hall. The entire area was destroyed by the rapidly growing vines. During the chaos, the giant's hand, still wearing the royal crown, landed near Jack. Meanwhile, outside the castle, the soldiers were still desperately trying to hold back the giant army. However, after a signal from the round-faced giant, all of the giants slowly pushed forward together. One by one, the soldiers were knocked down. The castle gate gradually began opening. Seeing this, the captain immediately ordered his men to shut the iron gate. At that exact moment, the round-faced giant emerged from the fog along with his companions. Unfortunately, the iron gate could not stop him for long. With a single powerful strike, he smashed it apart. Then the giants marched into the castle. When they saw all the human soldiers standing inside, they became very excited. The giants were just about to attack when a sudden sound echoed from behind them. Every giant immediately turned toward the noise. The round-faced giant carefully looked into the crowd and then suddenly dropped his weapon. Seeing this, all the other giants also threw down their weapons and fell to their knees in front of the humans. Watching this unexpected scene, the captain was completely shocked. Then suddenly Jack came forward wearing a magic crown and ordered all the giants to return to their world immediately. When all the giants return to their world, all the trees are cut down. After this, Jack and the princess get married, and with that, this story ends here. If you liked this video, then like it and subscribe to our channel to watch more such videos. Thanks for watching.